about death?
Makes you realize how precious life is.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
I believe in cycles, whether that reincarnation has lots of other things attached to it, but I do believe that we move through to another realm and it's possible for us to come back in different ways, so maybe.
What inspired you to get into this work in the first place?
Death has always been a very formative part of my life. When I was 16, my dad died of a glioblastoma brain tumor, so I had the chance to see how death is done, and fortunately for me, it was done in a very healthy and healing and kind of transparent way. So I've always had that kind of in my family culture, in my community culture. And a couple of years ago, a friend of mine just came to me and we were looking for something to do. I quit my government job and I wanted something where I could be of service and where I was using my skill sets. And she brought this idea of death doula work and end-of-life planning to me, and it was just like all these kind of strings through my life experience and my work experience and my skill sets and my passion all just kind of came together. Yeah.
What are people's biggest regrets in life before they die?
It's different. There's a study. I'm like going to evidence. I'm kind of an evidence-based kind of a gal, but there's a study that looks at 5 regrets. You're putting me on the spot to remember all of them, but a lot of them, most of them are about living an authentic life. Like saying what you mean, going after your passions and your interests, having deep relationships, telling people that you love them, and focusing on relationship versus those kinds of material things, that idea that no one ever really wishes that they worked more on their deathbed. They wish that they had more time and more meaningful connections with the people that they love. Yeah.
Well, I never heard of that doula. What does it mean to be that?
So it's an ancient way of being of service. It's basically something that families used to do for one another. It used to be, death care used to be done in community, and through time, over time, we've become more and more distanced from that. And so death doulas is now an emerging field where we're professionals that are trained in end-of-life care who support individuals and families before, during, and after death with practical support by getting their affairs in order, physical support, emotional support, that process of coming to terms with your mortality, and spiritual and existential support. How you move through the dying process in a loving way and with dignity.
Is it ever hard to separate yourself from like other people's regrets? Does that really take a toll?
I'm fairly new to working with people who are actively dying, so that's a piece that I'm starting to negotiate right now. I haven't come up against that yet. I've been fairly good at being quite conscious of what's mine and what's theirs. With end-of-life planning, that's focused more on the pragmatic stuff of like, what's the paperwork, what's the administrative stuff that we need to complete our lives and have our wishes honored. I haven't really come across that yet. The fortunate thing is that my job is to help people identify what those regrets are and then find ways to move through them and solve them. So it's a very proactive, very meaningful job that I'm in. I get to work with people at this stage of life, generally where they want to make those changes, so I can see that transformation happen and be a part of it. Yeah.
What's something that you've taken from your own experience and brought into your personal life as a result of your position?
I'm like a major planner, and for years, like after my dad died, I had like a crippling fear of death. I think a lot of us do. I don't think I was abnormal in that. We're in a society where we don't talk about it, we don't think about it. And so until this new work came to me, I kind of did what most people do, which is to just try and ignore death, deny that it's something that is a part of life. And so for me to be in integrity with my work, I had to open those doors. I had to do that work, and I'm still doing it. It never ends. It's a process. So for me, I did my end-of-life plans. I've got my advanced care plan done. I've got my health representative, and every day I work on making the life that I want to be proud of having lived on my deathbed. That's summarizing, I think it's a quote by John O'Donohue. So just living with intention, living with purpose.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find there's a lot of differences in interacting with people who know they're going to die soon?
Like I said, I'm new in my journey to working with people who are actively dying. But I mean, in my personal life, I think it just depends on how you're meeting the inevitability of death. Some people that I've worked with who have a terminal diagnosis are totally pragmatic and calm about it. There's a serenity that comes with them knowing that it's near, but that's certainly not a universal experience. I think it's really different. Really, what I've noticed, the way that you approach death is how you approach life. Like life is the primer for it, right? So you start doing the work now, that'll set you up well for when your time comes. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on work and research being done on using psychedelics for people who are facing?
Oh yeah, I've seen some headlines about that. I have no idea. I think it's interesting. As long as it's done ethically and all that, I think, why not? Yeah.
What would you like to see more of in the end of care field?
Oh my gosh. It's everything, just more resources. Palliative care, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. So palliative care is care that can be offered at any time in your illness. You don't have to be at death's door to access palliative care. Palliative care is all about keeping you comfortable and to reduce suffering and pain, physical, emotional, existential, all of that. And a lot of people don't know about it. They don't know to ask for it, or they are paranoid that if they access palliative care, that somehow is going to hasten their death. And the opposite is actually true. There's studies that show the earlier in your diagnosis that you receive palliative care, the more comfortable you live and the longer you live as well, versus people who didn't receive palliative care or who waited until they were very close to death. But we don't have a lot of practitioners that are trained in it. We don't have a lot of resources in our healthcare system. So most people, sadly, don't access palliative care. And that it's a game changer in terms of quality of life when you're dying.
So I'm just like starting out my life, so so it's kind of, I don't know if you'd be dealing with this, but I was having trouble finding out what I wanted to do to live an intentional life and what I want to see myself doing in the future. Do you have any advice for that?
Keep asking the questions. That's all you can do. Keep searching. Yeah.
I don't know how to word this, but do you think it's better or worse to know when you're gonna die?
Such a personal thing. Totally a personal thing. I don't know. Yeah.
You mentioned that one of your favorite things about death was how it made you look at life. What do you find at the end of their lives is people's favorite thing about life?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't worked enough with people at end of life to see a pattern. Like I said, I think it's what you make of your life that affects what your death is going to be like. Where the regrets are, where the joy is.
I have a question about spirituality or whatever that means. As you're planning working with people, end of life kind of questions that come up. How does your work help people connect in with their own existential kind of worldview their own traditions, their own family, ethnic, spiritual kind of perspective, because they're often related to end of life or life itself, or what's the purpose of all of this, and what the meaning of death, and how does that fit? How do you help people kind of work through those kind of questions?
I ask questions. I ask exactly those questions. So a death doula, we don't have an agenda. You know, we offer information input sometimes, but mostly we just ask like really good questions and flow with wherever the person is going. So we'll talk about spirituality. We'll talk about cultural roots, and if that's something they're interested in exploring. And then it's that person's job to go and find that information and to make meaning of it. So really my job is to act as a guide, to offer some information, input, some suggestions about what other people have done maybe. But really I'm curious. My job is to be curious.
I guess this is more of like a practical question, but like, so do death doulas have like a practice, or are you an individual practitioner, or are you part of a group? Or
Yeah, so
how does that work?
it's a new field. So right now we're a fee-for-service private member of a person's care team. So we have our own practices, our own consulting businesses. And there's kind of two movements. One is that this belief that death care and death doula work should be owned by the community. It's something that we really want to enable families and communities to do. And so that's something where money shouldn't be exchanging hands, you know, where it's just this innate thing that we need to reclaim in our communities. There's another approach, which is that this is a legitimate part of the medical and palliative care team, and that the public would benefit from doula care being integrated into the mainstream system. So, I mean, they're not totally opposed to one another, these different views, but there's definitely certain different forces that are kind of working to make both of them happen. I'm a member of the End of Life Doula Association of Canada, and so that organization has created a scope of practice, a code of ethics, with the aim to provide quality, standardized care, so that when you hire a death doula, you know what you're going to get. They're accountable to another body. It helps to protect the public and to increase the quality of service that's being offered. Yeah.
But how do we work to decommission that stigma that we have towards death in Western society?
Well, as a Western industrialized culture, we are at a disadvantage in terms of how we handle death, simply because we try and disengage from it. And so emotionally and spiritually, we're hurting because of that. And there's other traditions that tend to do death better than this culture does. And so how can we improve that? How can we initiate a culture shift? And I think by having these kinds of conversations, like talking about it is so key. There's death cafes. There's 2 that have just started up in the Greater Victoria area, and it's a specific format, but it's a place for people to come together and to talk about death and to normalize the conversation. And I think grief is another thing that we need to learn how to do better, and to normalize talking about it and showing it and expressing it and being okay with sitting with what feels like dark emotions.